Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime.
Take two, Mike.
Take two. Yeah, welcome back to Dark Poutine. I am Mike Brown, and Matthew is finally speaking into the proper microphone, and his headphones are not the thing that's recording.
I had no idea that my headphones actually had a microphone in them, but it seems like they do, Mike.
Welcome to technology, Matthew.
Speaking of technology, I had a dream about totem poles and Thunderbirds last night after reading this script.
I noticed, and I was so happy upon awakening that I saw that you'd actually read the script that I sent you.
You know I always read the scripts, Michael.
I know you do. Well, let's do this thing.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Listener discretion is strongly advised. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We're two ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
For generations, people across North America have reported seeing enormous birds, describing wingspans that seem impossible and encounters they struggle to explain. Long before those reports were written, the Thunderbird was already known in many Indigenous cultures, where it is understood as a powerful and sacred being associated with thunder, lightning, and the forces that shape the natural world. For some it is symbolic, for others it is real. These are living traditions that deserve care and respect. This is Dark Poutine, episode 415, The Legend of the Thunderbird. The road is empty, just a long stretch of asphalt cutting through the trees and low hills, the kind of place where you can drive for minutes at a time without seeing another set of headlights. It's late afternoon. The sky is open, pale, quiet. Then something passes overhead. At first it feels like a cloud moving too fast. A shadow slides across the road, across the hood of the car, and disappears just as quickly as it came. The driver looks up, instinctively, expecting to see a plane. There's nothing. No engine noise, no contrail, just sky. Then it comes back. This time it's clearer. Wings wide, slow, the kind of movement that doesn't match anything familiar. For a moment, it blocks the light completely. Then it's gone, disappearing beyond the tree line as if it never were there at all. Encounters like this have been reported for eons, across Canada, the United States, and beyond. People describe enormous birds, wingspans that seem too large to be real, shapes that move in silence, and leave behind more questions than answers. But stories of something in the sky, something powerful, something tied to storms and sound, go back much further than any modern sighting. Long before highways and newspapers, before anyone tried to measure what they were seeing, there were already stories being told. And those stories are still being told today. For many indigenous nations across North America, this is not a mystery, it's something known. The Thunderbird is a sacred figure in many cultures, including the Kwakwaka'wakw, the Haida Nation, the Anishinaabe, and the Lakota. It's often associated with thunder, lightning, and a power that transcends the physical world. These teachings come through oral history and lived tradition, and they carry meaning that is not meant to be reduced to a creature in the sky. The Thunderbird is not traditionally described as an undiscovered animal or something waiting to be proven. And yet many of the modern sightings sound physical. People describe wings, movement, scale. Something they feel they've seen with their own eyes.
It's funny how fast we go looking for a wingspan, Mike.
Right.
Like that's going to settle it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting, this one. Some people are seeing something. Yeah, we'll get into it. We'll get into it.
You're like, I want to tell the story now.
I want to talk about it.
Well, we are.
Yeah, we're going to. So where does this leave us? How does a sacred being become something that gets reported, measured, and, in some cases, pursued? Let's try to untangle this mystery. We begin with the origins of the Thunderbird in oral history, then move into the accounts recorded by settlers and newspapers before looking at the sightings that continue today. Along the way, we stay with the tension between belief and interpretation and how stories can shift depending on who's telling them. To understand the Thunderbird, one has to begin in a place predating written records. These are not stories that started in accounts posted between cat videos on the internet. They come from oral traditions that have been carried forward for generations, shared through language, ceremony, and art. Across North America, many indigenous nations describe a powerful being connected to the sky, to storms, and to the sound of thunder. In English, that being is often called the Thunderbird. But even that name can flatten what are, in reality, distinct teachings. In Northwest Coast traditions, the Thunderbird is a supernatural being tied to storms, weather, and the balance of the natural world. Said to live in the mountains of the Pacific Northwest, it creates thunder through the beating of its wings and lightning from its eyes, and its role extends beyond force. It's also connected to renewal and bringing rain that sustains life. Among the Kwakwaka'wakw, the Thunderbird lives high in the mountains, descending at times to interact with the world below. As documented in Franz Boas' early ethnographic work, the Thunderbird is a, quote, gigantic bird whose flapping wings produces thunder and whose blinking eyes flash lightning. The description repeated across studies of Northwest Coast cultures, though details and interpretations vary by source and community. Immense in size with a wingspan, quote, as large as 2 canoes, and strong enough to, quote, carry a killer whale out of the water with its talons, the Thunderbird resembles an eagle but is distinguished by curved horn-like plumage. Within Northwest Coast cultures, it holds high status, its image reserved for, quote, the most powerful and successful chiefs and families, appearing prominently on crests and totem poles.
So, Michael.
Yes.
I think we as Canadians should all start using canoes as a unit of measure.
Well, I think you are probably correct that we should do that because, Americans use dishwashers, for example.
Let's use, I think you and I need to figure out how many canoes away we are from each other, from your place to mine.
We didn't have time to work this out while we were recording, so I calculated Matthew's request to measure our distance apart in canoes. This gets pretty nerdy, so bear with me. To cover the typical 46.5 kilometers driving distance between us using canoes laid end to end, you're looking at a surprisingly large number once you factor in realistic sizes. Most everyday canoes, the kind people take out on lakes and slow rivers, measure around 15 to 16 feet, or roughly 4.8 meters in length.
Using that as a baseline, it would take in the neighborhood of 9,600 to 9,700 canoes to stretch across the full distance. I'm sure your life is better for this knowledge. Now back to Matthew and I conversing.
What I find fascinating, and we're not making fun of Indigenous culture here, but it is interesting how when there's no sort of official form of measuring something,
You use what's familiar.
yeah, it's fascinating.
So you could see why a culture would measure in canoes. They're a familiar thing to people of that culture.
And to most of us up here in Canada, actually.
Yeah. Now, remember a 4 on the floor and Mr. Canoe Head?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Back to Thunderbirds. One tradition explains why the Thunderbird is placed at the top of totem poles. During times of food scarcity, people called upon it for help. After aiding them, it asked to be depicted, quote, at the top of a totem pole with its wings stretched out, end quote, a placement that continues in many carvings. The totem poles in Stanley Park in Vancouver are an easily accessible example of this to local folks. Another story places the Thunderbird alongside a figure known as the Great Chief, Namoquayelis, who lived on a mountain near Cape Cook on Vancouver Island. During a great flood, the Thunderbird appeared, transformed into a human form, and helped the chief. It later searched for survivors and invited them to witness a Thunderbird dance, ceremonies and privileges that were passed down through generations of the chief's family. Among the Anishinaabe, the Thunderbird holds a different but equally significant place. The being is often associated with the upper world, part of a layered understanding of the universe that includes sky, earth, and water. In Anishinaabe teachings, the Thunderbird is connected to storms and to balance within the natural world. It is sometimes described as a protector and a force that maintains order. As recorded in teachings shared through Anishinaabe cultural sources, the Thunderbird is, quote, a spirit being that lives in the sky and brings thunder and rain, end quote, and its presence is tied to the health of the land and the relationships between beings. Among Plains nations, including the Lakota, the Thunderbird appears within a broader spiritual framework. The Lakota term Wakinyan refers to thunder beings that are part of a complex cosmology. These beings are not always described as birds in a literal sense. Instead, they are powerful entities associated with storms, with sacred knowledge, and with forces that exist beyond everyday experience. In Lakota teachings, the Wakinyan are connected to the west, to the direction from which storms often come, and to a network of relationships between spiritual beings. What becomes clear across these traditions is that there's no single Thunderbird story. There are shared themes, power, sky, thunder, but the details differ. These are living traditions still taught and understood within their respective cultures today. The Thunderbird acts, it enforces, it responds. Across many traditions, it's connected to protection and authority, often standing in opposition to powerful underwater beings, great serpents, and entities of the deep. These conflicts reflect balance, tension, and relationships between different forces in the natural and spiritual worlds. These meanings are carried through storytelling, ceremony, visual art, and lived experience, passed down through oral tradition within a framework that values relationship.
Once you step outside of a cultural framework, you don't just hear the story differently.
Right.
You almost have to rebuild it in terms that you understand.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, there's that old Joseph Campbell idea. What he said is, this is really cool. Myth is other people's religion, and religion is your own myth.
Sure.
I've always loved that line.
I like Joseph Campbell, yeah.
He's my homeboy. And what he's really getting at is that the label depends on where you're standing. So if you're inside the culture, it's truth. If you're outside of it, it's a story. Once it becomes a story, that's when things starts to change, which you're getting into here.
A cultural perspective.
When early European settlers and explorers encountered these teachings, meaning shifted almost immediately. Filtered through interpreters and observers who carried their own assumptions, spiritual beings became legends. Complex teachings became simplified narratives. Writers in the 18th and 19th centuries filed the Thunderbird under, quote, Indian mythology, placing it alongside dragons and griffins. a comparison that may have felt natural to them but stripped the Thunderbird from everything that it gave meaning. It became something to be categorized, compared, and explained away. Even careful early anthropologists shaped what they preserved. Franz Boas and others documented stories and descriptions that might otherwise have gone unrecorded. But those accounts were still translated, structured, and published for audiences who lacked the cultural grounding to receive them fully. Within indigenous cultures, the Thunderbird remained what it always had been. Outside them, it became something else. The distance between cultures is evident in how art portraying the Thunderbird was interpreted. The same images already described, outstretched wings, curved beak, bold geometric form on poles and regalia, carried layered meaning for the communities that made them. To outside observers, they registered as striking depictions of a large bird. The deeper significance didn't travel with them. To an outside observer, they are striking. They are also easy to misread. By the time newspapers began circulating widely across North America, that misreading was already embedded. What explorers, missionaries, and traders had written down, accounts of immense birds, beings tied to storms and thunder, had been drained of spiritual context and reframed as folklore. By the late 1800s, newspapers were a dominant channel for public information, and they carried a steady stream of unusual reports. Giant birds began appearing in print with increasing frequency, describing in physical terms something seen and something measurable. The language of belief had been replaced by the language of evidence. One of the most widely cited examples appeared in the April 26, 1890 edition of the Tombstone Epitaph in Arizona. The article describes a creature encountered by ranchers in the desert. I've chosen to reproduce the entire fascinating article here. The language is old. Found on the desert. A strange winged monster discovered and killed on the Huachuca Desert. A winged monster resembling a huge alligator with an extremely elongated tail and an immense pair of wings was found on the desert between the Whetstone and the Huachuca Mountains last Sunday by two ranchers who were returning home from the Huachucas. The creature was evidently greatly exhausted by a long flight, and when discovered was able to fly but a short distance at a time. After the first shock of wild amazement had passed, the two men, who were on horseback and armed with Winchester rifles, regained sufficient courage to pursue the monster, and after an exciting chase of several miles, succeeded in getting near enough to open fire with their rifles and wounding it. The creature then turned on the men, but owing to its exhausted condition, they were able to keep out of its way, and after a few well-directed shots, the monster partly reeled over and remained motionless. The men cautiously approached, their horses snorting with terror, and found that the creature was dead. They then proceeded to make an examination and found it would measured about 92 feet in length, and the greatest diameter was about 50 inches. The monster only had 2 feet, these being situated a short distance in front of where the wings were joined to the body. The head, as near as they could judge, was about 8 feet long, the jaws thickly set with strong, sharp teeth. Its eyes were as large as a dinner plate and protruded about halfway from the head. They had some difficulty in measuring the wings as they were partly folded under the body, but finally got one straightened out sufficiently to get a measurement of 78 feet, making the total length from tip to tip about 160 feet. The wings were composed of a thick and nearly transparent membrane and were devoid of feathers or hair, as was the entire body. The skin of the body was completely smooth and easily penetrated by a bullet. The men cut off a small portion of the tip of one of the wings and took it home with them. Late last night, one of them arrived in this city for supplies and to make the necessary preparations to skin the creature, when the hide will be sent east for examination by the eminent scientists of the day. The finder returned early this morning, accompanied by several prominent men who will endeavor to bring the strange creature to this city before it is mutilated. Well, that account is striking, but it stands apart from Indigenous teachings. There's no reference to the Thunderbird as a sacred being, no connection to storms or spiritual meaning. Instead, the story is presented as a real discovery. And while the article is often cited, no physical evidence from the encounter has ever been verified. Is this just another example of grifting newspaper editors of the day making things up out of whole cloth just to sell papers? There isn't any follow-up story. Hoaxsters and grifters have kept this story alive by creating photos they claim were taken at the time of the alleged capture of a Thunderbird. The most famous photo of what appears to be a deceased pterodactyl is nowhere near as large as the one described in the Arizona article. The catch is being displayed by several armed men in era-appropriate clothing in front of a livery and feed stable with a couple of hunting dogs for good measure. In Unexplained, author Jerome Clark compiles several mid-20th century reports of unusually large birds in the United States. In the early 1940s, writer Robert R. Lyman described seeing a bird near Coudersport, Pennsylvania, which took flight with what he estimated to be a 20-foot wingspan. In 1948, multiple witnesses along the Illinois-Missouri border reported a condor-like bird said to be about the size of a Piper Cub airplane. 2 decades later, sightings in Pennsylvania continued. In 1969, the wife of a Clinton County sheriff claimed to see a large bird over Little Pine Creek with a wingspan, quote, about as long as the creek was wide, estimated at roughly 75 feet. In 1970, several witnesses reported a dark-colored bird, quote, soaring toward Jersey Shore, Pennsylvania, describing its wingspread as, quote, almost like that of an airplane. Stories like this were not isolated to the U.S. Across the Canadian prairies, newspapers and local accounts reported on unusually large birds. In Manitoba and Saskatchewan, rural communities occasionally described creatures that seemed far larger than any known species. Some reports claim that livestock had been taken, small animals lifted and carried off. These accounts were often brief, sometimes only a paragraph, and rarely followed up. They appeared in local papers or were passed along through word of mouth before being picked up elsewhere. Details varied, of course, but the core idea remained the same. Something large had been seen in the sky. More after a quick break.
And we are back, Matthew, at the halfway point.
Are we there already?
We are.
I like the story of the Thunderbird, Mike.
I do too. My uncle Don Brown, was obsessed with it.
Was he?
And he wanted me to write an entire book on the Thunderbird. He's since passed away, so honestly, this episode is in honor of my uncle Don.
Oh, that's great. In the first half, I noticed we keep coming back to the idea that Europeans heard these stories and, quote, simplified them. Mm-hmm. They took something sacred and made it literal. And I'll be honest, I think that's a bit too easy because once we say that, it turns into this kind of quiet European bashing, and it lets everyone else off the hook because the truth is it's not unique to Europeans. This is human behavior, right?
It is, yeah.
You know, anytime a story crosses a cultural boundary, it changes because it has to. It gets reshaped into something that the audience already knows how to understand, right? Something that's visible or more concrete. And you see it everywhere, like the jinn in Islamic tradition.
Another fascinating thing, yep.
Right, was this complex moral being, but as the stories were moved into Persian and South Asian storytelling, they became genies, sort of like specific things. And
then you have Robin Williams doing his thing.
Exactly. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
The Naga in Indian traditions was tied to balance and cosmology, but then when it moves to Southeast Asia, a literal giant serpent, right?
Right.
And even Buddhism, when it moved into China, this abstract philosophy became something more specific. It's the same pattern, and it happened here too. Even the Wendigo, which also fascinates me.
Me too, yeah.
in Cree and Ojibwe traditions, it really wasn't necessarily creature. It was like a moral condition.
Mm-hmm.
It's about greed and about becoming something hollowed out by hunger. But in Plains traditions and Dakota, Lakota, it shows up more as something that's external, like something that you might encounter. So I find it really fascinating what people do from different cultures is you decode things and create stories that are maybe less meaningful or differently meaningful.
Mm.
Even the Thunderbird, you're telling these stories across the different nations in North America where it was a slightly different thing.
Yeah.
But collectively, it's this giant bird.
Right. Yeah.
We always take something we don't fully understand and remake it into something that we do. And it's not a European problem. It's a human reflex. And it's fascinating, isn't it?
It's the trope in horror movies of Indian burial grounds, etc.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
What was that? The first one was kind of Poltergeist, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's Poltergeist, there's Pet Cemetery. Yeah, pretty fascinating what one culture does to another's sacred traditions.
One person's religion is another man's myth, right?
Here in British Columbia, similar reports surfaced along the coast and the interior. Accounts describe massive birds moving over remote areas, sometimes seen only as shadows crossing the ground. In regions where storms roll in quickly from the Pacific, the connection between sky, weather, and movement was already part of the landscape. When something unusual appears, it stands out. One report from the late 19th century, cited in regional compilations of newspaper accounts, describes a, quote, huge bird seen over a rural area with a wingspan estimated at several meters. The description is restrained compared to the Arizona story, but it still emphasizes size, something beyond what would normally be expected. In Ontario, there are scattered mentions in the late 1800s and early 1900s papers of large birds seen near lakes and farmland. These accounts often avoid dramatic language, but they still point to something unusual: a shadow crossing a field, a bird described as, quote, larger than any eagle. From Thunderbird, a Canadian legend on mysteriesofcanada.com, summarizing ethnologist Claude Schaefer's note about an object in Calgary, Alberta, quote, the wing of an extraordinary bird, perhaps a thunderbird, was in the possession of a curio dealer in Calgary as late as 1940. This wing was initially found by Cree Indians from Masquacus, Alberta, formerly Habima, south of Edmonton, Alberta, end quote. Interesting.
Yeah, I always like these details. The idea that somewhere somebody has a literal piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
A wing in a shop.
Yeah, it's a wing in a shop, but it's always, I saw the wing in the shop, but I forgot to take a picture of it or something like that. Or, I saw this wing in the shop, but when I went back, it was gone.
Ooh.
It's always the same story. Yeah. The same article, quoting a 1925 hiking report near Lake Louise, Alberta, quote, in July 1925, hikers reported seeing a massive bird evocative of the Thunderbird near the Tower of Babel, a mountain in the Canadian Rockies southeast of Lake Louise, Alberta, end quote. The piece continues that Canadian naturalist Dan McCowan discussed the case in his book. Also from the Mysteries of Canada article, Blackfoot traditional accounts are phrased as direct sightings in Alberta. Quote, other members of the Blackfoot Nation, in addition to White Bear, claim to have seen the Thunderbird around the eastern slopes of the Canadian Rockies. A Blackfoot named Dog Takes Gun claimed that his parents saw a Thunderbird near what is now Calgary, Alberta, in the 1860s. In the same decade, Piegan Blackfoot warriors, led by Heavy Runner, saw a Thunderbird while on a raiding party against the Crow, which they took to be a bad omen, end quote. There have been more modern accounts. Mysteriesofcanada.com quotes a sighting in western Quebec. Quote, in the fall of 1974, Daniel Caron and his sister Suzette and Remy Bassett of western Quebec saw a large bird near the village of Louvicourt, Quebec, east of Val-d'Or. Daniel first saw the bird drinking at a pool of stagnant water. Later, the trio saw the bird flying off with a dead beaver in its clutches, end quote.
Yeah, and this is where it starts to feel almost believable again, right? Like not a mythical creature, just something very large doing something very real.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
This also reminds me, my friend Olin.
Yeah.
They lived sort of out towards you, but, they had lots of forests in their back garden, and they have a big dog, but also a Chihuahua. And whenever they went inside, they were making sure the Chihuahua was inside because they were worried about an eagle coming to scoop it up.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, eagles take cats as well, right?
Yeah.
It's really interesting how nature works. Eagles are big. They're big,
Tooth
big
and claw.
birds.
Tooth and claw. Yeah.
Yeah. From a self-reported Thunderbird sighting thread on our cryptozoology Reddit 2019, a Reddit poster named Crixus Maserati situates the event in Mississauga, Ontario. The commenter described a December 2011 encounter while standing on a balcony with two others when they noticed a, quote, dark black silhouette moving in a willow tree that looked at first like, quote, a big black tarp being animated by the wind. As they focused, quote, things like wings, a neck, and the structure of a bird became very apparent, end quote. The three went outside, and the witness approached to within a few feet before the animal reacted, recalling it, quote, it shrieked a sound so intimidating and loud like an eagle on steroids, but much deeper and sharper, end quote. They all described it as, quote, all black with some red feathering near the face, end quote, estimating the wingspan at, quote, 16 plus easily, and a height of, quote, 8 to 10 feet, end quote. The bird then moved between buildings and disappeared. The witness said they, quote, never felt that specific feeling of fear before, end quote, and noted the experience stayed with them, though no clear photos or independent verification were obtained.
Yeah, you know what stuck out with me there's the black tarp. It's such a great, such a cool description because before it comes anything extraordinary, it's just something unclear, right? And just the idea of a black tarp flapping is sort of, you know, the brain's trying to make sense of it in real time, right?
I have seen things that I can't explain, and my brain is trying to put an ordinary explanation on to it as well.
Yeah.
I won't get into it really here, but it's interesting when that happens to you. Like your eyes play tricks on you, and your psychology then tries to fill in the gap.
Yeah. Yeah, same with sounds as well.
Mm-hmm.
Justin woke up, thought he heard Steve whimpering, but Steve was asleep at the top of the stairs.
Interesting.
So he was obviously worried about him and heard something and thought that it was Steve.
Right. So the moral of the story is don't trust your brain. I guess we're all hooped. Anyway, another Reddit user from Ontario, Jugsnot, oh boy, described a daytime sighting while driving down a country road at around 15:30 hours. At first, they noticed what looked like a very large tarp in the yard, estimating it to be about 7 to 8 feet long. As they continued watching, the shape changed. A head had risen from the middle of the mass, attached to a long, slender neck. The witness realized they were likely looking at a large bird positioned with its back toward the road, its wings spread out on the ground as if it was basking. They described the body as mostly black, while its head and neck were gray, appearing almost bare of feathers. The bird had a large black beak, with black eyes and a face that looked like a white-backed vulture, but it had more beak, noting that the beak appeared somewhat bulbous toward the end. The sighting was brief as the witness was driving and initially thought it might be something explainable. They later reflected, I regret not taking it more seriously and not stopping. Thunderbird sightings can be approached as a tangle of biology, psychology, and culture rather than a single mystery with one neat answer. When we look at the possibilities side by side, most explanations boil down to misjudged real birds, quirks in human perception, and the long shadow of indigenous Thunderbird traditions on how witnesses interpret what they see. Ornithologists tend to start with the simplest hypothesis. People are seeing real but already known large birds and overestimating their size. Great blue herons, bald and golden eagles, turkey vultures, pelicans, cranes, and large corvids can all look startlingly big when backlit, low over the horizon, or seen briefly at close range. One ornithologist recounts being called to assess, quote, a bird as big as a small plane that was reported to be hunting children, which turned out to be an ordinary great blue heron whose size had been wildly exaggerated in retelling. In that piece, the ornithologist argues that sensational giant eagle accounts often fit the profile of familiar species, plus some very exaggerated details. There's also a detection bias. Large birds are often more likely to be noticed and reported than small ones, amplifying their presence in anecdotal datasets. A 2021 study on citizen science bird records found that large-bodied birds were overrepresented relative to what systematic surveys would predict, likely because they are, quote, more easily found and identified, end quote. If people systematically notice and talk about big birds more, not Big Bird from Sesame Street, but actual big birds, it's not surprising that legends and cryptid lore gravitate toward them. Another naturalistic angle is that some modern Thunderbird reports may involve non-native large birds that have escaped captivity or wandered far outside their normal range. We had a peahen in our carport at one point. That was weird. The Thunderbird entry on Cryptid Wiki notes that, quote, exotic non-native birds like the African crowned eagles and Andean condors possibly escaping from captivity may have played a role in Thunderbird sightings, end quote. A condor with a 3-meter wingspan appearing where people don't expect it could produce a genuinely extraordinary impression, especially if seen briefly and then magnified through memory and storytelling. Even when the species is native, unusual behavior can make it seem uncanny. A large raptor carrying prey, a heron, flying directly overhead with outstretched wings, or a flock of cranes in low cloud can all read as anomalous if you lack a frame of reference. Cases where witnesses report a bird carrying implausibly heavy animals, like deer, are particularly suspect to ornithologists who see them as normal observations inflated beyond biological limits. Within cryptozoology, a popular speculative explanation is that thunderbirds are remnant populations of prehistoric giant birds such as teratorns or even surviving pterosaurs like pterodactyls. Teratorns in the fossil record did reach impressive sizes, and pterosaurs obviously capture the imagination, so they get invoked as plausible templates for modern monster birds. The Cryptid Wiki entry entertains the possibility that thunderbirds, quote, may be modern-day teratorns, while acknowledging that, quote, no flying bird bigger than an albatross or an Andean condor has been discovered in recent times, end quote. From a scientific standpoint, this scenario is considered extremely unlikely. Large, soaring vertebrates require big ranges, leave bones, feathers, DNA, and frequent observations, and are exactly the kind of animals that modern ornithology and aviation would struggle not to notice. As one ornithologist writing about giant eagles puts it, it is very unlikely, nay impossible, that giant eagles exist without birders knowing about them, and anecdotes without physical evidence are not enough to overturn that. The same argument applies even more strongly to pterosaurs, which mainstream paleontology considers extinct since the late Cretaceous period. Psychology helps us to understand why witnesses sincerely report outsized creatures even when nothing unknown is present. Human size perception is context-dependent and error-prone. Distance, angle, lighting, and background all affect how big something looks. Research on other monster traditions, such as sea serpent sightings, shows that people often misjudge distance and even size at relatively close ranges, then fill in the gaps with their expectations or fears. Experiments on arachnophobes, for example, find that those who fear spiders literally perceive them as larger than non-phobic observers do. Fear inflates perceived size. A giant bird silhouette glimpsed unexpectedly over children or livestock is likely to be encoded as bigger and more menacing than a calm, measured observation would allow. Cognitive psychology also notes our brain's tendency toward gestalt completion. We complete partial visual information into coherent entireties, which can turn ambiguous shapes or fleeting views into vivid monster images. Once the story is told and retold, social reinforcement cements the oversized version as the true memory. Putting aside the indigenous art depictions we've already discussed, Documentaries, podcasts, and online cryptid communities keep Thunderbird imagery in circulation and prime people to connect an anomalous aerial sighting with that label. A recent article on giant bird sightings notes that these reports persist partly because of the lasting cultural influence of Thunderbird traditions, combined with misidentified wildlife and perception errors. Social media and niche TV shows also reward striking, dramatic stories, so witnesses have incentives, conscious or not, to emphasize the extraordinary aspects of what they saw. One particular show I know always asks, "Where's the woo?" Anyway, psychologists who study monster narratives argue that such beings often externalize diffuse anxieties into concrete, larger-than-life shapes. As one psychologist puts it when discussing giant fictional characters, quote, "The bigger the threat, the bigger the monsters we create," end quote, suggesting that awe-inspiring animals resonate with our need to make sense of large, impersonal forces. Thunderbirds in that light may serve as a powerful symbolic container for both environmental awe, storms, mountains, oceans, and social tension, whether or not any unknown species lurks behind the reports. Finally, we have to take into account the very human factors, hoaxes, exaggeration, and the slow drift of folklore. Some classic Thunderbird photographs and stories have either been debunked or shown to be misremembered composites of older tales. But they keep resurfacing in encrypted media because they are narratively satisfying. People like to see that stuff, and they get clicks. Sharon Hill, writing about a modern Thunderbird TV episode, notes that a region like Chestnut Ridge, Pennsylvania has become a magnet for every kind of anomaly, Bigfoot, UFOs, portals, and more, and warns that escalating reports are, quote, "certainly related to more people looking for strange things and more people willing to take their claims seriously," end quote, not necessarily to any real increase in monster activity. Some witnesses may consciously inflate details for attention or to fit community expectations, while others simply unconsciously embroider the story over time. In communities where Thunderbird is a respected spiritual figure, traditional stories can also be subtly reframed in modern cryptid language when told to outsiders, making it hard to disentangle sacred narrative from a zoological report. Taken together, the most conservative reading is that Thunderbird sightings arise from a mix of real large birds, perceptual biases, cultural scripts, and storytelling dynamics with little support for an undiscovered giant species. At the same time, the persistence and power of these accounts speak to something very real in human experience, our enduring urge to project awe, fear, and reverence onto the biggest things we see in the sky.
Maybe that's the part worth holding on to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, back in the original teachings, this wasn't something to see. It was something that meant something about balance and about power and about our relationship with the world around us.
Mm-hmm.
We've gotten very good at explaining things, but not asking what they're really for.
Right. And that's it for Dark Poutine episode 415, The Legend of the Thunderbird. I miss you, Unc. He called himself Unc the Hunk. Anyway.
That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week.
Well, we've got some voicemails, Matthew. It is that time. Let's have a listen and see what people have said to us.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Matthew. Hi, Steve. This is Miss Plummer, Deb Plummer, calling for the second time to your show from North Carolina. Love the show. I look forward to every Monday listening to this show. Anyway, so over the weekend, I listened to another Canadian podcast about the Mountie. I think his name was John Wilson, who murdered his first wife so that he can marry the second wife, the next day or something like that. It was crazy. It was a two-parter. Anyway, that got me to looking up other things about Mounties because I've always been fascinated with Canada and the Mounties and, the Royal Canadian Mounties, etc. And I found a story about the lost patrol of Inspector Fitzgerald, and I thought that might be a good case for you guys to cover if you haven't covered it yet. I think last time I called, you guys had already covered the case I suggested. But anyway, hope you guys are doing well. We are getting ready to get a tornado here in North Carolina. That's a rarity for us. I don't mean to sound that silly, but it's been crazy weather today. But we're not getting snow because in the South, in North Carolina, we don't handle snow and ice very well. So I hope you guys are doing well. I'm not going to tell you to do what to your hat. But I do love the show, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate you guys. Have a good one. Talk to you later. Bye.
Well, thank you so much. I love that accent, and I'm sure she thinks we're the ones with the accent. And a tornado.
Fun fact, the RCMP badge, since she likes Mounties, features a bison head, maple leaves, a crown, and a scroll.
Yeah. Yeah,
I love the symbolism on like uniforms and things. You know, just like how over time these things become like, okay, this is the badge, right? Like we're gonna have a bison head, right? And I think the bison head is because the RCMP was actually created back in 1873 to bring law and order to the Northwest Territories. So that's probably why there's a bison head.
I'm kind of curious about this Inspector Fitzgerald that she's talking about.
Yeah, you should look that up.
I see a guy who was born in Halifax and died in the Yukon Territory, which is interesting. And he had spent a year's service in the South African War.
The Boer War?
So his patrol became lost in 1911, February, and he and his companions eventually died, 3 from starvation and 1 by suicide. Interesting.
Oh, I thought you were going to say 3 from starvation and 1 from eating too much.
1 from eating humans. No, that's a Wendigo story right there, Matthew. Interesting. So, yeah. What do you think Miss Plummer does there in South Carolina? Obviously, she's a tornado watcher for fun.
Yeah, so Deb Plummer is an electrician.
She's an electrician. Oh, she's not a plumber.
No. She's an electrician, and she's always correcting people.
Oh, well, there you go.
I wonder if she's related to Christopher Plummer.
Christopher Plummer? I've told it here before, like many, many years ago. My mom and dad and I went to see an IMAX show downtown one time.
Uh-huh.
And
they have IMAX in your hometown?
No. Here, when they were here
okay.
visiting.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking an IMAX in Riverdale or wherever you're from.
Bridgewater.
Yeah.
Riverdale, Bridgewater, which made the horrible news. Okay, anyway. We went to the IMAX downtown at
Vancouver.
I think it's Canada Place where they used to have an IMAX down there. But anyway.
They still have the Canadian flyover thing there.
It's flyover Canada now. So we sit down at the IMAX to watch the show, and who should come in and sit down right beside me? Amanda Plummer, Christopher Plummer's daughter.
Oh, there you go.
Sat right beside me for the show, which was kind of cool.
How did you know it's her? Is she an actress or something as well?
She was in Pulp Fiction.
Was she?
She's the actress standing up on the table screaming during the restaurant
That's Christopher
robbery.
Plummer's daughter.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Well, there you go. It's something new. Well, anyway, thank you, Ms. Plummer. We very much appreciate your call. And let's listen to another one because there is one.
Hi, this is Cheryl from Mississauga. I'm a frequent listener and lover of the podcast. I just listened to the episode about the Toronto 18, about the radicalized suburbanites. Yeah, I was teaching, I'm a retired teacher, and I was teaching in Northwest Mississauga during that whole time. And interestingly and scary enough, one of the 18 was a school bus driver at my school. So that was pretty darn weird. Definitely a bad apple. I'm trying my best to be a good egg and not a bad apple. And, I guess go shit in your hats and have a great day. Thanks. Bye.
I love that. I guess.
I guess.
So Cheryl from Mississauga, a retired
Is a
teacher.
teacher.
Has she moved on to something else now, Matthew?
Yeah, I think she's taken up the piano.
She's taken up the piano. Good for her. That would be really freaky. Is like you're a kid, and all of a sudden, you've got a new bus driver, and then you learn your old bus driver has been arrested on terrorism charges. Holy smokes!
My grandmother was a bus driver, but we still don't know yet if she was a terrorist.
I doubt Matthew's grandmother was. I highly doubt. Was she a Stockton or
No, Virginia Buttery?
Oh, right, Buttery. Yes, I like that last name, Buttery. It seems
really
so creamy.
Everyone pronounces it Buttery.
Buttery, yeah,
But it's literally spelled Buttery. So
it's Buttery.
It's
yeah.
Buttery.
It's such a buttery last name, Matthew.
Ginger Buttery is my mom.
Ginger Buttery. Interesting.
That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome.
Alrighty, we have a patron this week, and her name is Marie Prevost. Is it Prevost or Prevost?
I would say Prevost. That's what I'd say.
Prevost?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a Patreon this week, and her name is Marie Prevost. And I hope I pronounced that correctly. And she is from Weyburn, Saskatchewan.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Weyburn, Saskatchewan. Do you, Matthew?
I do not.
I'm just kind of curious of what goes on there. It is the 10th largest city in Saskatchewan. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
I didn't even know there were 10 cities in Saskatchewan. That's how much about Saskatchewan I know. And I'm not making fun. It's just I don't know a lot about Saskatchewan. And it looks like Weyburn was kind of founded because of the CPR happening through there. So,
there you go.
Which makes sense. Yeah. And it's really close to the North Dakota border.
Oh, is it?
So-
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting. So
I wonder if people in Weyburn, in Ontario, well, before, the harder border stuff going on, in Ontario, people from where I'm from, they just pop over to go to discount malls in Michigan. I wonder if people in Weyburn, historically would pop over for some deals in North Dakota.
Well, it's like people in Langley popping over to Bellingham for deals.
Bellingham.
Yes. Yeah. It's Bellingham here, but it's Bellingham in the UK. So, yeah.
I think she works with the Weyburn Arts Council.
The Weyburn Arts Council. That's nice.
I think that's her job. She does something there.
The world needs more arts. I really believe
does.
that it does. Yeah.
It does. I bet you there's some good photographers in Weyburn, because Saskatchewan, even though it's flat, it provides for a beautiful landscape for photography.
That's what I was just thinking. The landscapes there are phenomenal. Like when I drove through, I was just blown away by the landscape.
I mean, it's almost so beautiful you have to become a photographer if you live
it's
there,
true.
you know what I mean?
And being somebody who loves photography, yes, you are correct. Yeah. All right. I'm just going to check something else here.
There's a Tommy Douglas statue in Weyburn.
Tommy Douglas, for anybody who doesn't know who Tommy Douglas is, can you explain the importance of that human being, Matthew?
He's the one that gave us our health care.
That's right. So because of Tommy Douglas, who is related to Kiefer Sutherland. It's Kiefer Sutherland's grandfather, I believe. Kiefer Sutherland's mom was
interesting.
Tommy Douglas's daughter, I believe. It's some relationship. They are related. So that's kind of cool. Little Stevie.
Oh, can you hear him?
I like hearing his little deep snore. I love it so much.
When I'm asleep, it actually helps me sleep.
Sure.
Sometimes when he stops snoring, I wake up because I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah, because you're concerned. Yeah.
Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal or interact using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my 2 books are available to order via links on the Dark Poutine website or anywhere fine books are sold. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you gave Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening. Tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing.
And that is it for this episode of Dark Poutine. So as Steve saws some Zeds, yeah, it's not Z's here in Canada, it's Zeds, saws some Zeds on Matthew's floor, it's time for us to say goodbye. So until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Steve says.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Bye-bye.